over the last few years, I've mentioned the Honda Civic Type R an awful lot.
Brilliant Civic Type R.
Civic Type R, Civic Type R. Is it as good as a Civic Type R? It really is the benchmark for hot hatches. But now there's a new one on the horizon. The FK8 is coming to the end of its production. So I thought we'd have one last look at why it's so good with the ultimate version. This is the limited edition.
This is a pared back, more track focused version of the already scintillating Civic Type R. It's also more expensive with a list price of £39,995, but it is also very rare because Honda's only produced 100 for Europe with just 20 coming to the UK, all in this shade of sunlight yellow.
Obviously this car is all about the driving experience, but it gets everything right before you even start driving. Just getting into this, it's perfect. The seating position, something we complain about an awful lot in hot hatches, is just right. The seats, instantly you know they're going to hold you just so. The steering wheel, lovely size, nothing too gimmicky, and Alcantara, which I love. And not just Alcantara up the top and down the bottom, but actually where you grip the wheel. I know, yes, fine, it can get smooth over time, but I think it's worth it. Elsewhere in here, the design is it's not particularly attractive, to be honest, but they've worked so hard to get the bits that you actually touch and need and use to drive so right that it somehow doesn't matter. Little things like this here. It's not that it's made of any particularly nice plastic or anything. There's quite a lot of scratchy plastics in here, but it just works. It's just simple. There's no toggling, there's no automatic, there's no matrix LEDs to sort of do a little dance. It's just on, off, high beam, low beam, high beam, low beam, like that. Simple. Just works. And I like that. The limited edition, well, it sort of comes without a few things. The extras are what it doesn't have. So if you don't like touchscreens, this certainly hasn't got one. It hasn't got any aircon either, so every so often you're gonna have to put the windows down and just to stop it misting up, which is a little bit annoying. However, they have kept the rear seats, unlike something like an R26R. So it retains quite a lot of practicality while also taking quite a lot away as well. Anyway, let's see what it's like to drive. First thing to say is that this limited edition doesn't get any extra pace from having more power and torque because, well, it's got identical figures to the standard Civic Type R, so 316 brake horsepower, 295 pounds-foot of torque, and despite the weight saving, which overall comes in at 47 kilos, the 0 to 62 mile an hour time remains identical at 5.8 seconds. However, this does feel pretty different.
Why? Well, it's all to do with the suspension setup and the way the limited edition goes round corners as a result.
So, for starters, we've got new BBS forged alloy wheels which save 2.5 kilos a corner, and we've got Michelin Cup 2 tyres as well. The result is a car that already had a huge amount of grip and precision, but now there's even more. The way this thing changes direction is extraordinary. So we've got new bushings at the rear, new lower friction ball joints at the front as well, all aiming up to sort of increase the lateral stiffness in the car. And what you can feel is that it's just so keen to get into the corners. So we come up somewhere like Quarry here, turn in on the brakes, and it just, if you trail brake in, it really will come round at the rear. It feels almost like a Mitsubishi Evo. It's got that same sort of pointiness and agility on the way into the corner. Thankfully, you don't have to drive it like that. I have to confess, I'm not the biggest fan of oversteering front-wheel drive cars. It's just never felt that natural to me. It's fine, I can kind of do it. I've rallied a couple of front-wheel drive cars, so you have to kind of get used to it, but I prefer to keep it much neater with front wheel drive cars, and this will do that as well. You can just get that little bit of slip as you turn into the corner, just to help you point in towards the apex. And the nice thing as well is you've got 3 stages of ESP, so you can either leave it all the way on, have it in the halfway setting, or turn it all the way off, just depending on how confident you're feeling. Sadly, one thing this does do is it still cuts the power when you left foot brake, which is just a little niggle.
The electronics will help with traction on the exit of corners too, but most of that work is done by the excellent helical limited slip diff between the front wheels.
Now, let's slow down for a second, because one of the lovely things about this car, and the mark of a truly great car, no matter what the price point, is that it's good to drive no matter what the speed. And that's certainly true of the FK8 Civic Type R. As soon as you get into it, I've already said the seating position and everything, these Recaros, it feels right. And then when you set off down the road, the steering, it's actually weightier in this limited edition, but even in the standard car, you can feel, just as I say, how stiff the whole car is. The way it turns in, it just seems to have a beautiful balance. It sits on the road 4 square, it feels low down to the road, and it feels so precise from the moment you get into it. So you can pick a line, and that's a really lovely feeling at any speed. Of course, the other thing that you can enjoy at any speed is the gear shift. And I'm not sure there's a better gear shift in any car on sale today. Some perhaps are slicker, some of Porsche's are slightly lighter, slightly quicker, but I think the way that this moves around the gate, the weighting of it, the mechanical element to it is just fantastic. And of course we have the lovely gear knob as well. In fact, they changed the gear shift for the updated FK8. And they put a 90 gram counterweight in it, and that made all the difference, because to start with it was okay, but it didn't have the quality of the very best Honda shifts. Now this definitely does, and I love this gear knob as well. It looks like a sort of upturned vase, doesn't it? But it's beautiful in its sort of matte finish, and it's almost a temperature gauge. So as soon as you put your hand on it, first thing in the morning, and it's cold, reminds you that the engine's cold, all the fluids need warming. And then as you use it more and the temperature increases, you know that, well, the car's ready to go as well.
Of course, for all the praise I'm heaping on the Civic Type R, I realise that some of you will just be thinking, but look at it! That wing! Those pointy bits! The audacity of it! And yes, it is rather more extrovert than your average hot hatch. But as I've said before, why should wild looks be the preserve of wildly expensive supercars? Admittedly, when it was launched, I, like most, shied away from such stylistic exuberance. You could turn up anywhere in a Golf GTI, not so much this. But increasingly, I found that I just don't care what people think. I might have it in a slightly subtler colour, but actually I don't mind the aerodynamically aggressive appearance anymore.
As I'm having a midlife crisis. I like the way the Hurricane STO looks as well. I know. It is so agile, this car. It's a level above, well, to be honest, any other hot hatch on sale I can think of. Love it through these chicanes, the change of direction. And it's not just the suspension, the whole structure feels so stiff. On the road, the way they've ramped up the damping, to be honest, I'd have the standard car. In fact, generally speaking, I would have the standard Civic Type R rather than this limited edition, because I just think as a road car, it's a better all-round proposition. But on track, this is ace. I really do think you need a track to appreciate how good this is as well. On the road, the damping's just a bit too firm. It doesn't quite sort of ride in that beautiful way that the standard car does.
While I can live without a radio, the LE's lack of aircon is actually quite annoying at times too. I suppose it depends why you're buying a Civic Type R. If it's just as a toy for track days, then the limited edition is the dream. But if you want a road car, then I'd spend my money on the less pricey standard version.
Although talking of price, these have actually been going for over list recently because demand has been outstripping supply. Even the standard one's been going for over list price, and these have been going for up to, I think I've seen prices up to £50,000 for one of these, 10 grand over. You thought it was only Porsches. I've said it before, but for me, it's not the GR Yaris. This is the best hot hatch.
If I was going to put a cage in a standard hot hatch and go tarmac rallying, it would be a Civic Type R, not the homologation Toyota that I'd choose. Both have of course been huge sales successes, and that is very good news, because it means drivers' cars are still worth the effort for manufacturers. It means there will be a successor to the FK8, although that must be a pretty daunting task for the engineers.
The new Type R has got a lot to live up to.
Thank you very much indeed for watching that. I hope you enjoyed that quick recap of the FK8 Civic Type R. What do you think of the colour? Should it have been called banana yellow instead of sunlight yellow? If you think it should, then, I don't know, hit subscribe. If you don't, then hit like. There we go. That's a fair compromise, isn't it? Or the other way around, whichever you like.